After Monty arrived in North Africa to take over the British Eighth Army, Rommel found out that a British convoy with over 100,000 tons of supplies was due to arrive in September, so he planned an attack at El Alamein on the 30th of August before the shipment could arrive. And Rommel had obtained a map of all the British minefields from a dead English officer in a jeep. While the British claimed they had intentionally planted the maps on a corpse, so the Germans would go around the minefields and get bogged down in the soft sand. But Rommel used the map to negotiate the minefield anyway, and yet his attack would fail for lack of fuel. The Russians were beating the Germans at Stalingrad, and after the Americans made themselves comfortable in North Africa in November of 1942, FDR ordered Churchill to show up at Casablanca in January of 1943 to hear the news from FDR that there would be no separate peace without including the Russians. FDR chose to hold the Casablanca Conference in French Morocco so that France could be well represented, and in response to the Americans' refusal to engage in peace negotiations with Hitler, the Germans at Tripoli surrendered to the British and were completely out of North Africa by the 14th of May in 1943, and 2 days after that, the RAF bombed Rome. 250,000 Axis soldiers surrendered to the British in North Africa that May, and the next month the British began bombing Germany in June of 1943, and on the 24th of July, the RAF firebombed Hamburg, killing 40,000 civilians. But Hitler could not make peace with Churchill because the Americans refused to go along, and that's when the Americans' Operation Roundup turned into the British Operation Overlord, a scheme to show the Americans once and for all what war planning was all about. For Hitler, this wasn't just about overthrowing the Treaty of Versailles, or getting German land back from Poland, or even getting the port of Danzig returned to the fatherland. It wasn't about the Czechs and the Austrians and the Rhinelanders joined to their German brothers in some kind of Nordic solidarity. This was about the ultimate fusion with their Germanic cousins in Great Britain that would forever erase the crime of having toppled the Tsar just because Russia had sided with France in 1914, and wasn't it always about the French? The British wanted to return the exiled Roman nobility to their rightful place within an even stronger British Empire, and to overturn Hitler's call to the common man by elevating him to a more noble status. They could restore the royal line of nobility in Germany. The Kaiser had still been alive when the British planners were working on Operation Crusader in 1941, and although he was 82 years old, the Kaiser had almost 24 offspring ready to step up into his place, and it was well known that from his exile in Holland, the Kaiser had refused to ever return to Germany until a successful restoration of the monarchy had taken place. Crusader was meant to put an end to the Italians who had occupied Tobruk for the past 30 years, and Italians had been there ever since they'd once ruled the entire Mediterranean for centuries as the Roman Empire, and Italy's King Victor Emmanuel III had handed over power to Mussolini when the Blackshirts marched on Rome in 1922. And King Victor Emmanuel III was still waiting in the wings, and he was also the king of Albania and the king of Ethiopia, and he had a son named Umberto, to whom he would transfer authority on the 10th of April in 1944. Of all the monarchs of Europe waiting to be restored to their thrones, Britain's most favorite was Peter II of Yugoslavia, whose godfather was the current King of England. And when the war finally ended, Umberto was King of Italy for 34 days until the monarchy itself was abolished on the 12th of June in 1945, and all male heirs to the throne were forbidden from ever setting foot on Italian soil again. Rommel was not a member of the Nazi Party, and Rommel had asked Hitler for permission to promote Jews serving in his army in North Africa to show the world that Hitler was not mistreating Jews. And Rommel ordered that his white POWs share the same quarters as the colored POWs, and that was when his supplies began to dry up. Monty had been in a good position at El Alamein to cut off Rommel's retreat, but Monty had given orders that the Germans should be allowed to retreat freely because they would be needed to stop the Americans who were at that moment on their way to Tunisia. At El Alamein, Rommel lost 50 tanks and 3,000 men, but suffered most from lack of Luftwaffe support, and then Rommel was once more ordered back to Germany to get yelled at by Hitler, and the British attacked on the 23rd of October by sending the Canadians forward in a suicide attack. 2 days later, Rommel came back from Germany on the 25th of October, but had only 150 tanks to Monty's 800, most of them Shermans, and Hitler ordered Rommel to hold his position to the last man, but Rommel disobeyed again, and Kesselring took Rommel's side. On the 3rd of November, the British sent the Indians from India forward in another suicide attack, and Rommel retreated from El Alamein the next day on the 4th of November, and would say later that his biggest regret was not retreating sooner, before he was left with only 30 tanks and no Luftwaffe support, but said that he'd been required to wait for permission from Hitler to retreat. Rommel was lucky that rainstorms had grounded the British air forces that last week, or the disobedient Rommel would have been annihilated in North Africa, and the Americans hit the beach 4 days later, on the 8th of November in 1942, the first U.S. boots on the ground in Hitler's war.